This is coming at a time when we have $92 billion in commercial debt, commercial real estate debt that is due to be refinanced this year, is coming due. Most all this debt was incurred by entrepreneurs and real estate developers during the quantitative easing period. So the debt was incurred at rates near zero. We've now been involved in it's been 7, 8 months of the largest increase in rates in history. So as they're having to go to the market, the debt markets, and refinance, the interest rates are effectively rendering these buildings uneconomic. Add on to this that in connection with the failure of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, that BlackRock has now been charged to sell $114 billion in mortgage-backed securities and commercial mortgage-backed securities that were held by those two failed banks. This is a crescendo moment in the global economy for real, at a time when who's going to buy this debt? Who's going to buy this dollar-denominated debt when you've got half the world in the past 2 weeks has effectively moved away from all trade in the US dollar?
There is a challenge that is coming from digital currencies such as blockchain technologies.
So I think it's important to share that anything can be tokenized.
All the money.
I like the idea of a gold standard. I mean, it could be used in a very cryptocurrency way.
Very much sooner than a lot of people understand or think. We will be all at a level playing field.
Hey, welcome to the show. Today is our first episode in April of 2023. How you doing today, Jimmy?
I'm doing good.
Awesome.
How's it going?
We're going to cover what happened this week in geopolitics, the world of money, as well as some blockchain news. Kind of an eventful week, would you say so, Jimmy? What was your take macro on this past week?
Yeah, it was definitely an eventful week. It seems that things are definitely accelerating in the geopolitical and macroeconomic world. So I really feel we're coming to a great crescendo where we're, the flippening or the switch flipping or something is imminent.
I agree. It does feel like there is this buildup, almost this powder keg of pressure, like a pressure cooker that at some point will explode. So we got a bunch of topics to cover today. The first one that we want to get into is something we've been covering in previous weeks, which is this notion of de-dollarization. Last week, we talked about the BRICS nations and sort of moving away from paying for energy in exclusively dollars. But this week, we actually saw a pretty remarkable clip from Tucker Carlson on Fox cover kind of some harsh realities about the situation with the dollar. Jimmy, what was your take on Tucker's speech, or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, his little report there. It was about a little over 14 minutes long. Is really good. So my impression is that the issues that we've been talking about for a couple of years now, these things that are starting to crescendo, is now starting to reach the mainstream. So that's just that's how you know that we're at the end, is that, mainstream media is starting to cover these issues like BRICS, in the weeks prior to this week. And now they're openly talking about other countries moving away from the dollar for trade, and how that ties into just the horrific policies of the US government and horrific monetary policies. So a couple of things that really, towards the end of his monologue, his report, he touched on a couple of things that were really significant to me. He talked about the depletion of the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and he talked about our gold, the holdings of our gold. Two of those would be, some of the most material assets that we could hold as a country. So we did a little research since then. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is now down to 371 million barrels. So to put this in context, it has not been this low since 1983, okay? It's down 200 million barrels since last year. So we sold 200 million barrels, mostly to China, during the past 12 months, which now have us down to, pretty much closing in on not an all-time low, but certainly a recent time historic low, lowest in 40 years. Current price of oil today, WTI is trading about $81. So our holdings in our strategic petroleum reserve represents about $30 trillion. Let's talk about the gold. Rosie Rios was recently in a seminar conference where she talked about, she's the former treasurer. She knows the status of the U.S. gold better than most. And during that show, she disclosed that there's about 268 million ounces of gold held by the U.S. The price of gold today, notably, is $2,023 per ounce. So it happens to be exactly what year it is. That represents about $542.2 billion in gold, which is not a lot. So I want to put this in the context of kind of the country's balance sheet, okay? Looked at the debt clock this morning. We're at our national debt's at $31.7 trillion, okay? Then we have unfunded liabilities. Think about basically debt that isn't collateralized of $183 trillion. Together, that's about $215 trillion in debt, okay? There's 334 million people roughly in the United States. So that means that each of us are carrying debt that we're kind of unaware of, obligations that as citizens of this country, it's $643.7 thousand per capita per person. And that's everybody. That's the kids too. Okay. So we're in a bad situation, liabilities versus assets when you're looking at the balance sheet of the United States, effectively insolvent. Where else can we find value? Well, probably the next biggest market would be all the commercial real estate, that's in our country. So think about all these skyscrapers in Manhattan and the big cities and all this stuff, LA, Houston, Chicago. So we look at that, and it's not a pretty picture. Since COVID, when everyone started working from home, and then businesses realized, we didn't lose any productivity. People can continue to work from home. So the vacancy rates in commercial real estate have risen to the highest point in history of 20% roughly right now. This is in the backdrop. So 20%, just so to bring this home, that means 1 in every 5 offices is sitting vacant, not paying rent in the country. So that's what 20% means. This is coming at a time when we have $92 billion in commercial debt, commercial real estate debt, that is due to be refinanced this year, is coming due. Most all this debt was incurred by entrepreneurs and real estate developers during the quantitative easing period. So the debt was incurred at rates near zero. We've now been involved in it's been 7-8 months of the largest increase in rates in history. So as they're having to go to the market, the debt markets, and refinance, the interest rates are effectively rendering these buildings uneconomic. Add on to this that in connection with the failure of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, that BlackRock has now been charged to sell $114 billion in mortgage-backed securities and commercial mortgage-backed securities that were held by those two failed banks. This is a crescendo moment in the global economy for real, at a time when who's going to buy this debt? Who's going to buy this dollar-denominated debt when you've got half the world in the past 2 weeks has effectively moved away from all trade in the U.S. dollar? So it's an interesting time, to say the least. And
what do you think this means
will provide some context.
What do you think this means for these office buildings? Are they just going to fall into disrepair if people are not going to be using them for businesses?
Yeah, I mean, there will, I imagine, be some people who are sitting on the sidelines with enough cash, with enough equity that can come in and buy up some of the most premium properties for a song. But after that, no, I think you'll see a lot of these real estate developers and office building owners are just going to throw their keys back to the banks. And Mark Moss actually did a really nice analysis of this sometime this week, about midweek, and he was saying he believes we're in like inning one of the banking crisis, and then talked about in detail the commercial real estate market. Did a really nice job. I encourage people to go watch that. But yeah, you're going to see people basically just throwing back the keys to the banks. Most of this debt is held by regional banks. It's not actually held by the big kid, J.P. Morgan, Wells, Bank of America,
Okay.
Citibank type banks. So I think we're going to see a massive regional bank failure crisis, not unlike the S&L crisis in the 90s. Maybe quite a bit more severe, and then you'll continue to see the bigger banks have to, take up these assets and try to monetize these assets in a market where there really is no demand for this type of dollar denominated debt anymore. So the knife is falling.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
expect, I expect whatever we're talking about this time next week is some of the cracks will have manifested in the system substantially. You could see a massive stock market crash, massive asset price crash. It's kind of time.
Because put the money aside for a second. If the sort of market has decided that the majority of companies or a ton of companies don't need office space anymore, even if the buildings were bought by someone else and maintained, it sounds like there just isn't enough demand for all the commercial office space. I'm curious whether it will be converted into something else or if it will just sit there empty. We'll have to see.
Yeah, the world is going through a great decentralization wave. I think we're going to talk about this later in the show. The need to come to a centralized facility and work together um, in the way that cities basically that's how they were developed and
Right.
constructed is really kind of changing. Is changing quite rapidly. And with technology, we're able to leverage that. We can kind of work from anywhere. People are electing to move, states that they've lived in and live in more kind of vacation type destinations and work from there. And productivity is staying, roughly the same. Um, so yeah, I mean, we're probably on the verge of some, pretty systemic type changes. Certainly, as the millennials and Gen Z continue to mature, and the generation, the boomers, and even our generation continue to drift into retirement and move on into the next iteration. We're the ones who basically think that that's valuable, that there's value in having all this centralization and people come in and doing a good 8 hours of work, in an office. And the next generation just they don't believe that. It's not consistent with their values. And soon they're going to have the numbers in the workforce to dramatically change that.
And I agree that this shift is happening and our generation was just used to having to go to work in an office. I am curious though in the long term if the relationships between people who work together will be different if you never physically see each other. I don't know, maybe it won't be. Maybe the in-person interaction is overrated, but I think I'd be curious to see how that.
Well, I mean, you and I are working together. You're in Georgia, I'm in Texas, and we're working together all the time. Um, uh, Other of the Valhill colleagues are in other jurisdictions as well. So I'm not seeing it really. The issues that are slowing productivity have more to do with the macroeconomic environment and the cost of capital than they do with the fact that we're maybe not doing as much team building in the same room.
Fair enough. All the places that serve the business world for like lunch things, those are going to take a hit though if people stop going to work for lunch.
Yeah, this is going to ripple, pun not intended, it's going to ripple through the entire economy. There's a lot of services that are around, people being in one location. Um, you know, whether it be food services, convenience services like dry cleaning and things. I'm sure the dry cleaning market in particular is already way down because as people are
Yeah.
not. Certainly, I'm not using dry cleaning as much as I did when I showed up in a suit and tie every day for 20 years. So yeah, it's rippling through a lot of the different the need to have a commuter vehicle is maybe not as significant. In Houston, which is the fourth largest city in the country, and there's still a lot of people that commute all the way across from other locations in the greater Houston area into downtown or into the energy corridor, into what we call the Galleria area, which is a big merchant center and with Galleria Mall and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you can see that's that type of things are going to slow down. The need for extra cars, the rate the gasoline is purchased, all that kind of stuff. But you know what? This might be a really good thing.
Yeah.
Might be a really good thing for people to not be spending half their day commuting to a place to work, where they can spend more time with their families, learn how to either become part of the creator economy or the gig economy. And these things are changing.
I lived in Atlanta for a long time, and people would intentionally live in places specifically where near their job because the traffic situation was so bad for so long that it would ruin your quality of life if you happened to get a job on the other side of town and had to spend 2 hours a day each way
Hmm.
driving. So speaking of real estate, I'm going to bring up the second topic we had on our list today, which is talk about what's going on with BlackRock and real estate. I know you dug into that a
Right.
little bit this week.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that a little bit in connection with the de-dollarization discussion, but the big news, uh, and this is going to also tie into the third topic as well. But the big news is that BlackRock has been tapped to sell $114 billion in these mortgage-related, both residential and commercial mortgage-related securities that were being held by Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. They've said that they want to do this very gradually and in a very controlled type of a manner, such that they don't end up further disrupting the markets. But where are these debts going to be sold into? The typical buyers of this type of security have been China, Russia, Europe, people like that. But BlackRock itself was just, I guess, overtaken by French citizens. Their
Yeah.
Paris location was invaded by the protesters in France, all because of they're completely sick of the way the government has been working with mega asset managers like BlackRock to basically divest them of their value and the value of their currency. And so it's leading to a lot of unrest throughout Europe.
And BlackRock and its sort of counter cousin company, Blackstone, have been on a real estate buying binge for quite some time. Kind of created this concern among a lot of people, especially those who live in rental homes, that Blackstone and BlackRock might become your new landlord and they might not be terribly benevolent in terms of making that a productive relationship. So we are seeing that people might be either waking up to that or don't really want to live in homes that are owned by BlackRock and Blackstone.
Well, this was the strategy of the Great Reset, right? You will own nothing and be happy. So as the debt was being pumped into the system and asset prices have been inflating, it's been these mega institutions, these asset managers have been, in some cases, the only people that can participate in that market. And so they have significantly been on a buying spree for the past 4 or 5 years, probably longer. But they've accelerated as the more money has been printed and basically been given directly to them. It didn't go to the people. So yeah, now they are sitting on a stockpile of what is, I wouldn't call it necessarily worthless, but it needs to be revalued probably 70%, 80% lower than the carrying costs on their balance sheets, because we've talked a lot about fair market value, you and I, right? And educating people on what that really means. Remember, it's a willing buyer and a willing seller, uh, knowing all the facts, right? Not being under any compulsion, like a government mandate to sell or transact to buy. And we're about to go into a bona fide fair market value price discovery for assets globally, and it's going to be a bumpy ride.
I also think that BlackRock and Vanguard specifically are on the radar of a lot of citizens around the world due to the fact that those two companies manage a lot of pensions. And there's concern that
Right.
if they were to collapse or have any serious distress, people who depend on that income would be in a tough spot.
Yeah.
We'll
So
see.
that's a really big point there, Molly. It's these pensions it's the pensions and the insurance companies that fund a lot of the acquisitions by private equity firms, by asset managers like BlackRock, Blackstone, Apollo, is another massive one. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's going to become very apparent to people as this kind of pain really starts to set in, that's where the mismanagement has been occurring, is basically at the government level in connection with these mega asset managers. And I think what we're seeing in France is this is just the beginning. Um, it's
Yeah.
probably going to be very difficult for these firms going forward.
It's a nice segue into topic number 3 for today, which is a little bit of the dystopian side of blockchain and money. There was quite a few concerns on both sides of the pond around central bank digital currencies. The first one came up with quite a few people expressing sort of nervousness or anxiety around Fed Now, which launches in July, and whether
Right.
that is kind of the gateway drug to a retail central bank digital currency in the United States. So I actually spent quite a bit of time looking into Fed Now months ago. I created a thread on it. And it's really a replacement for ACH, which is how banks send money to other banks. Right now, if I wanted to send you some money, Jimmy, from my bank using bill pay, it would take a minimum of like 2 to 3 days if I was lucky. And so if we were trying to increase the velocity of money within the economy, or I, for some reason, needed to get that money to you very, very quickly, that's difficult to do in the banking system. So FedNow will reduce the settlement time between making payments through banks to almost instantaneously. I actually think it's already being used. I noticed with some money that I was using via ACH from my bank to crypto.com, actually, for the last 2 years, it's taken 2 to 3 days. It has been going through very, very quickly now. I even saw some YouTube money come into my bank account same day. So, like, I think it's actually running where they just haven't formally announced it or it's not rolled out everywhere. A central bank digital currency, there's sort of two types. One is the wholesale, which is, again, how banks send money to other banks. None of us really have any concerns about dystopian wholesale CBDCs because they don't really concern us as regular people. The retail thing is
Mhm.
very, very different. And one thing that people need to understand about the worst sort of dystopian retail CBDC is it would cut the commercial banks out of the flow of money, would kind of make commercial banking almost obsolete in much of what it does. And the commercial banks in the United States are very influential and have a tremendous amount of power. So they probably are not that likely to sign their own death warrant with a true dystopian one where the Fed itself issues us money directly via a wallet and the commercial banks have no role. So I don't really see that happening. I've had a lot of discussions with people about that over the last couple of years. So I don't see Fed now as an indicator that we're going to have a retail CBDC. However, the situation in Europe is quite different. Yesterday, I actually watched a video with Christine Lagarde where she pretty directly says that cash over a certain transaction, I think it's €1,000, will be outlawed, and you're going to have to make these larger transactions with the CBDC. And she said that even sort of transactions as low as €300 to €400, she was kind of a little bit vague about the exact number, will be programmed, meaning there might be certain types of purchases that you are not allowed to make, which again is not what we want. The ECB is not an elected body. Let's say Christine Lagarde turned out to be a total crazy person. You want to remove her from office. I don't know if there's any mechanisms for the citizens of Europe to do that, considering the central bank is not something that the people of Europe elect or have any oversight on. So it does look like there are some dark sides with the money system coming in Europe. So I would suggest everybody pay attention to that. And if you have the ability to make a voice clear that you don't really want programmable money issued directly from the ECB. That kind of does tie into the next sort of related thing with, we're seeing these mechanisms.
Before we go off of that, I mean, people, the age of blindfold compliance really needs to come to an end, because if this infrastructure is put around people where they could literally tell you because of climate change or because of some issue that's of concern to the government that isn't of concern to everyday people, that they can make you eat certain things, they can make you not be able to spend, not be able to invest on certain types of platforms, not be able to have value outside of the system in digital assets or precious metals or these types of things, is complete control over your life. It is a slavery type situation by the government, which is, these governments have been showing certainly throughout the COVID period that they're perfectly willing to act in a tyrannical type of a way and shut freedoms down and remove what are otherwise inalienable rights from people. So it's time for people to wake up and realize that that's very much what's happening. Currencies are only valuable to the extent there's a demand to use that currency. So if the people will not use this programmable money that's tied to social credit scoring and what you eat, and what you're spending your money on, and choose instead to use digital assets that are more free, Bitcoin, XRP, certainly these types of things there should be a massive demand to try to have these non-governmental type value moving assets in order to protect yourself from truly being a slave to the government.
Totally agree. We even saw some of this overstep recently, well, certainly last couple of years, but recently with media, and that the government is still taking measures to influence the amount or the type of content that we can see or watch or read, which I think is totally unacceptable. And it's just further reinforced this need we have for decentralized media outlets where censorship isn't even an option. Removing files, deleting videos should not be an option for some third party with undisclosed interests to have that authority. I mean, Rumble is now not allowed in France. A friend of ours had his YouTube channel in the United States. He lost it this week due to a hack issue, but to get his content channel back was quite a laborious process, because you can't just call up YouTube and be like, hey, I got a problem, help me out. We are reliant on these very central entities that have very closed doors and make it difficult for us to, one, know what the rules are, two, have any kind of troubleshooting process if you lose your account or a hack, and three, like, they can delete files. Like, videos disappear from YouTube because they don't meet some sort of undisclosed set of rules. So what are your thoughts on kind of the need for decentralized media in the world, Jimmy?
I think it's another really serious thing. I think people are really starting to appreciate now that what is on mainstream media is either like years behind of what's actually happening in the world, or it's part of a very formalized narrative that's being delivered directly from the government. It's been clear now that the government basically took over Twitter for all intents and purposes. They put FBI in the executive offices of Twitter. They completely controlled the upper management and decided what information that was coming out about COVID, information that was coming out about the vaccines, information that was coming about the election, Hunter Biden laptop. It goes on and on and on and on. And there's a large swath of the population that thinks that whatever is on these platforms is actually the truth. Some people say it's not true unless it's actually on these platforms. So it's a super dangerous thing. And then you see as people try to set up competitive platforms like Parler was supposed to be to Twitter, Truth Social, to Twitter, Rumble to a YouTube, in order for other thoughts, other voices to be able to get another part of what is true out into the marketplace of ideas. And it's basically forcibly shut down. Right now we've got the Restrict Act, right, that we talked about last week with this TikTok ban, but it's really more than that. It's an attempt to basically criminalize someone pursuing the truth, someone seeking what is true for their own lives and for the lives of their family. So is there a need for decentralized media? Absolutely. We need to basically be moving media assets and content creators into some type of decentralized media platform. It's what Library was attempting to do, right? And the government, came out and basically has bankrupted Library. Well, it was going to be competitive to YouTube, and it was probably going to be very successful. So there needs to be some type of aligning of the content creators and moving to platforms that are not as reliant on governmental funding and payments, and can basically have the other side and aren't subject to this kind of deplatforming type stuff, whether that be hacks or just flat out making it illegal,
Right.
like what they're putting forward in the Restrict Act. This is all big stuff. It ties in. Not only does the media decentralized media concept tie into just the messages that are coming out, but it ties into we need a decentralized election system, right, to truly know what is happening. The media in this country basically decided the last two sets of elections. The media decided that Joe Biden won the presidential election, despite all the facts that really suggest the truth is probably otherwise. So
And that's just when
the
we woke up
media,
to it.
right, yeah.
Who knows how long the
So,
elections have been manipulated?
all right, it'll be interesting to see what happens to this very video. The fact we're talking about this stuff.
So maybe no one gets to see this video because it gets censored. See.
We'll see.
Yeah. All right. Our next topic was actually quite an interesting surprise this week. RFK Jr. announced that he was running for president. What was your take on that?
Well, I was super surprised. I've been following Robert Kennedy Jr. for a while now because he has been, in other countries speaking out very vocally about the medical system, speaking out against vaccine injury, and I generally see him as a very conservative type person as far as his values, conservative for like humanity at least, and not all that different from a President Trump's values and platforms and kind of the MAGA movement. But his announcement was pretty profound to me because he went directly at this CBDC issue and things of this nature. There's so much tied up with the Kennedy family, right? JFK was the last person to try to move us, president to try to move us back to a truly asset-backed monetary system. And we now know that agencies of our government basically conspired to have him assassinated. The president that had tried before that was Abraham Lincoln. And he was the only other president, I think, I'm pretty sure one of the only others, certainly one of the only others that was assassinated as well. And then President Trump, was trying to get Judy Shelton onto the Federal Reserve Board. Judy Shelton's a famous gold bug. We've got a little segment on Judy Shelton in our intro, right? So I think this is fascinating. It's we had one of the before this woke movement really caught hold, the progressive left caught hold of the party. An RFK Jr. would represent a return back to the center of that party. So you could see a lot of people, your Bill Maher's of the world, your really, I'd say, intelligent Democrat Party type people, really backing an RFK Jr. Versus a Trump, but then having Trump, who's also quite centric when you start to look at these policies. Both of them, being aligned and returning back to the gold standard. It'll be fascinating if what plays out is we have a Trump-Kennedy election in 2024, where they basically agree on most all the issues, right? I mean, what an amazing time for America that could be if the leadership of both parties end up kind of coalescing around something really, really positive for America.
But think about how amazing the debates would be if we have two people committed to sort of discussing truthfully some of these issues and awakening both sides for the people who are not yet awake. It would be remarkable. And the other thing that's crazy about this RFK thing is, has a challenger ever challenged the incumbent president who could run for a second term? Like that's not that common.
Well, no, I mean, every year, every election cycle, there is, also rans in each party that go for the nomination of the party. I think what's so significant is that, the Kennedys were a political dynasty, right? And really controlled the Democrat Party for, decades. And they've kind of been quiet, since JFK Jr. was running for Senate in New York against Hillary Clinton, and his tragic accident occurred with the plane crash. The Kennedys kind of, it was Ted Kennedy ended up retiring from the Senate, and that that family dynasty kind of has gone away for the past 20 years.
Right.
And to see, JFK's nephew basically throwing his hat in the ring to represent that's what's profound is it's basically a return of political eliteness from way back that's going against what has become the new political elite of Obama, Clinton's, Bush's, and Biden.
It's remarkable timing too, in my opinion, that a lot of discussion around Trump's presidency has been connected to what JFK originally wanted to do and start in terms of reforming banking, getting rid of some three-letter agencies, maybe exposing some things around this sort of deep space program, the dark black budget stuff that we don't really know much about. And now we're sort of in this era where Trump has certainly the center stage. He had a press conference earlier this week after being arrested, which we forgot to add to our list of things to talk about, the Trump in New York.
We got a meme. We got a meme on it though.
And so all of a sudden now RFK Jr. being thrown into the wing. It just sort of feels like things are fitting into place like a puzzle.
It really does. It's starting to look that way. And, we started the show kind of talking about this crescendo, thing that's happening. I think the coming together of RFK Jr. and, throwing his hat in the ring to run for president really does start to. These things are starting to click together really, really fast. And I, for one, from a policy standpoint, if these are the policies, Trump Kennedy type policies that emerge as being the dominant policies for America, I am super positive about that, super excited. I believe we should return to the gold standard. I think we should get rid of the three-letter agencies, the deep state. I would like to see America be the free, country that I thought I had grown up in and lived in. It could be a really remarkable time. It's going to be required. This return to the gold standard is going to have to happen, or else we will be completely out of the global economy. Because we're going to have to start making things here again, and there's a lot to do. There's a lot to be done that can really bolster humanity globally, and humanity needs a free America to do that.
I'd prefer to live in a free America if given the choice.
Yeah, for sure. This one we've had for the past 3 years is kind of garbage. It's
It does feel like theater at times.
yeah, we need more unity, and that's really it's a return to more common sense values that'll bring that about. Family values. I'm still old enough to remember when Ronald Reagan was running for president against Jimmy Carter and his failed economic policies and other policies. It was all about a return to the values of what being a free American is all about. And maybe didn't completely get us completely reset to where this country once was. Maybe at the time, around the time Bretton Woods was done.
Right.
But really put us back on path that legacy lasted for 40 years. But it's time that the situation's so far out of control. I think all of us are tired of seeing these images of people beating the crap out of elderly people, or trashing a store, or just it's people are becoming fearful to even step out and go about their daily lives, even go to the grocery store or whatever. It's just not a place that any of us should want to be in.
I agree. Let's uplift the last part of this. You ready for meme time? Okay.
Let's do memes. I
right,
think I've got the first one.
Yeah.
And it's a continuation of my inverse Kramer fun.
Hopefully that's the fun that keeps on giving.
It's the fun that keeps on giving. And again, to remind everybody, there's this whole ETF thing where they're betting against everything Jim Cramer says, but he basically keeps coming out and making these declarations on CNBC, and it's like they're classically the exact opposite what turns out to be. So this week's is we've got the Jim Cramer of 1912, and he's standing out in front of the Titanic, and he's declaring to someone, "This ship is completely unsinkable." Jim Cramer, April 11th, 1912.
I don't think we're ever going to run out of those because he's just such a character from this season of our life.
I know. It's great.
All right. My first meme is actually, it's a similar version to one I saw a long time ago. There was a dog on a beach with a no swimming sign. I think it wasn't. The dog had taken the sign out. This one is a chicken sitting on a sign that says, "Do not sit here." It kind of goes into this idea of becoming ungovernable, which is more and more attractive to me as I realize the ridiculous amount of rules that our fake government has been giving us that we have all complied with because we didn't know better or were too fearful. And so if we all just stop playing along and consenting to their ridiculousness, what are they going to do?
What are they going to do? And have you seen that they're like talking about giving cows these pills that will keep them from farting and belching, like because of climate change? It's like, that's what I think of when I see this very, very funny meme. All right, my next one, as we alluded to, President Trump was arraigned. He got arrested and was arraigned in New York this week. It was on Tuesday, which feels like it was a long time ago now. But I mean, if ever you want to know that like the whole system has jumped the shark, this thing happened. So somebody came up with this great concept, but it's a picture of Trump sitting in his arraignment, looking, just as poised and calm as ever. And they say, "This is me after claiming Zelensky as a dependent on my taxes," which I read that. That's actually a great idea.
Right.
How much of these billions that have gone over, how much is allocable to each one of us? I mean, we could probably just write Ukraine across the top of the 1040 and slap that bad boy in the mail and call it a day.
I think it's a legitimate expense. I'm going to take that as a deduction. Doesn't.
All right, this
All
next
right,
one.
My last one I just thought was very funny because I'm obviously for doing this, a huge meme fan. And it's this sort of family from the 1950s. And one of the children asks the mom or the dad, "Wow, you fought in World War III? What weapons did you use?" And the dad replies, "Mostly memes." It's humorous if you're a part of the crowd, which I self-selected to be, where we're in this information warfare age, and we see that memes are a very powerful tool, actually, to wake people up.
They are very powerful. I could see myself saying this to my grandkids one day, and them going, "Oh, memes." Well, Molly, another great week, another great show. I want to wish you and your family a very happy Easter.
Likewise.
And I hope it's beautiful in Georgia, and you guys have a really great weekend.
And it does seem like we're still on the cusp of like something big happening at some point. We're just sort of sitting around enjoying each day until we end up on the other side.
Yep. Somebody introduced the idea that, we're all waiting for this black swan event to occur. And if everyone is expecting a black swan, but the black swan never occurs, that in and of itself is a black swan. So think about that over the weekend.
Yeah.
How ironic. Don't you think?
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.